My second heart is not only magenta, is also a little bit blue. And this goes for my representative work as a board member for the Federal Association for Employer Branding, Recruiting and HR Marketing. It's more operating in Germany, and we represent more than 50 companies with more than 6 million employees behind. So we have really the mindset to strive things forward in our group-wide exchange, what we do here. So these are my both hearts. And of course, my biggest heart goes with magenta and blue for the analytics part, because I believe in data. Then data is for me something like 42, right?
I agree. Thank you very much, Ute. And we also have Jonathan Berlan, Head of Candidate Experience of UCB on board. Jonathan, what would you like to tell us about you?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you for listening to me and having me here today. Things that you need to know about me. So I head up talent acquisition for UCB, a biopharmaceutical company. I've been in the job just over 18 months now. I've been in talent acquisition probably 15 years, coming up to 15 years now. And I'm also in charge in UCB of the candidate brand, or the employer brand, which is what you see around me right now. It's been a great adventure. I'm very passionate about what I do. Data is also something that increasingly guides all the choices we make. But I see it as very much a double-edged sword. So I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion. And I guess that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan. And from Randstad, we have Joost Heinz, Vice President of Global Insights on board as well. Joost, tell the audience something about you.
Thank you, Gregor. So yeah, I'm Joost. I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm almost working for 10 years for Randstad. And I am a bit of a data geek. I'm the type of person that will put everything in a spreadsheet, and if it's not in a spreadsheet, it's not real, basically. And I'm very intrigued on human interaction with spreadsheets as well, because I see a lot of good use with data, but I also see a lot of bad use and being bad decisions made out of half of the data, all that kind of thing. So that's intriguing me, and I think that could be interesting for today as well.
Thank you, Joost. And yeah, as said at the beginning, for me, I'm Gregor Stanlonis, Operations Manager at Randstad SourceRight. I'm the one, together with my teams, utilizing data and creating actual insights out of it to make our customers successful. I'm really the one, for me, it's always about understanding data and getting away from a just subjective feeling and more to an objective one. But for today, I would like to start and kick off today's session with a presentation from Joost regarding how data can help recruitment to be more strategic. Before we'll get more insights from Ute and Jonathan on how they utilize data and insights actually in their recruitment strategies. In the second half of the session, we are happy to answer the questions from you, the audience. You can let us know your questions by typing them into the chat box. So let me just quickly share my screen, and we start with you, Joost, first. Just a sec. There we go. Now it's gone. Let me just check. There it is. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Joost, it's yours.
All right, thank you. So I want to open today with an opportunity, but definitely also a challenge. Like I said, I've been with Randstad for 10 years. I've seen many of our clients, and I often see that recruitment is becoming an afterthought in a company. And if we look at, if we can go to the next slide, there we go. If we look at how a company is going through how they make their strategy, we see that they take into account all kinds of things that help form the strategy. So major trend, consumer insights, what is the competition doing, and that forms their market understanding. Based on that, depends a little bit on the culture, the company culture. They go through either strategic thinking, formal strategic planning, or more ad hoc opportunistic decision making, or a combination of those things. And then the company has a strategy. And then from that, they go into strategy execution. And one part of that strategy execution is recruitment. And then as recruitment, often you're kind of like already in a part. If you can stay on the previous one, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
If you as a recruitment, you're then already you have a fact already that you need to work with that strategy, where there might be parts in that strategy that you don't completely agree with or are really hard to accomplish when it comes to skills and availability and all those kind of things. And one of the symptoms I hear a lot that I think is part of this thinking is, we don't get enough forecasting. We need to get better forecasting. And I think that is a symptom of to show that we're, as recruitment, often at the end of the stick and everything is already laid out and we just need to execute on what is done. And that is a very tricky situation because how do you get out of there? And so today I want to go into how do we get out of that, and how can we make sure that recruitment becomes more strategic and becomes a more strategic partner of your executives in your organization. So for then, I want to first go in quick back to school. If we can go to the next slide. If we go back to school and we think about what were those factors of production that you had in your economics class, and then if we think about that situation now, and there were four factors, just as a reminder, four factors of production. That's land. So what physical things do we need? Natural resources. Well, if we translate that to 2021, you see that this is becoming increasingly less important. In the digital nature of how we do business now, we need less physical infrastructure. We're less dependent on physical things like oil and gas and that kind of things. The importance is slowly being reduced. If we think about capital, we look at capital, the interest rates are now at the lowest they've probably ever been, and there's an abundance of capital in that way. If we look at entrepreneurship, we see that it's easier to start a company. It's easier than ever to start a company. So these things are becoming less of a blocker, and a company's future depends on its scarcest resource. If we look at labor is quickly becoming that scarcest resource. Therefore, the future growth of our companies that we work for is dependent on how able are we to attract, retain, and maybe grow our own employees. And we can see the first little parts in the global economy that this is becoming the biggest issue for most companies. I think it's interesting to look at countries that are now slowly coming out of the pandemic. I think we all know that New Zealand is basically a COVID-free country. And we can see that there is already the first items that we can see that labor is getting scarce. And that is in their wage inflation, which has been low for the last few years, but all of a sudden in the last few months, the wage inflation has gone up from 0.5% to 2%. So this could be one of those indicators that talent is becoming scarce and will lead to inflation, and that the real competition over talent is starting off. Therefore, companies simply cannot afford anymore to have recruitment as the afterthought. So if we can go to the next slide. So if we then go back to that strategy forming process, what we often see is that when we get this fact to say, hey, we need to find data scientists because data is becoming increasingly important for us. And then we turn around and say, well, actually, that is not, if we look at the area where we're located, there are not that many data scientists. And we start to say no, and this is not possible. Then a lot of times we cannot really change or influence the strategy anymore because the company has already said that, might have already shared that with investors. And then the message to recruitment is just make it happen. We need to find a way, just make it happen. So what do we need to do to change this process? What do we need to do to make sure that we're not at the end of the stick anymore? And my point here today is we need to be much earlier in that process of the decision making. We need to swim with the current and not against the current. So we need to start influencing that strategy making. The availability of skills, or how the skills will move in the future, will depend on how successful you are as a company. So that needs to be taken into account in making that strategy. So if we could go to the next slide. So if we look at those things and starting to influence that first part of the strategy making in the company, we need to start supplying our executives with these little nuggets of data that is important to them. A couple of major trends that our executives need to be aware of is, for example, automation. Automation will impact a lot of the jobs. PwC is estimating that 35% of the working population in the UK will be affected by automation. Just that number is insane to me. In 10 years, 30 and more than 10 million people will be affected by automation. That's something that we need to talk about as a society, but also as companies. That immediately has an impact on what skills do you have in your organization, what skills do you need to have in your future. It's both positive and negative, because it can mean that if we talk about automation, it can mean that you need people to automate a lot of your processes. But it also means that a lot of skills that you have in your company now might not be necessary in the future. So what are we going to do with these people? Can we retrain them? What does it mean for their future and our company's future when their skills are not needed anymore? This becomes a very big issue. Then talent scarcity. I think that is a topic where it hits the hardest. It is becoming increasingly an issue, and how do we deal with it? Because we all know in recruitment that talent scarcity is something that is not hard, is never something, but if we change the skills, or we're okay to change the profile, there's a lot possible. So we need to have that conversation and think about what can we do. Consumer insights. When we talk about consumers, we often talk about the users of the end product, but also increasingly important to understand is that we use, or that we think about, what is the interest of our people, and how do we engage with our people. So for example, I find it always interesting in financial services, a good pay was important to people that worked in financial services, were people that often looked for security, but they're all moving to digital skills. They're competing with digital companies for digital skills, and then pay becomes less important for people that with digital skills. They're more looking into, how do I stay ahead? What are the most challenging topics that I can work on? So this part of these kind of consumer or talent insights are becoming very important. And of course, we need to talk about, to our executives, on what is our competition doing with talent? Are they able to find talent that we are not able to attract? What does that mean for how we position ourselves? All these things we need to bring to attention for our executives. And the key point is, because I think there has been many generations discussion of what role does HR have in the boardroom, and often that has been, yes, we need to have a seat at the table, and then slowly that faded away again. I think the structural thing that we need to do is we need to become much more factual. We need to bring much more insightful data and take away that part of HR that can be seen as fluffy by our executives, and really show, okay, here's a benchmark of the salaries. This is the supply and demand for that same benchmark that is connected to it. If you look at this data, it can only mean that there's going to be pricing pressure, salary increases on the horizon. What does it mean? How are we going to deal with that? So these data points we need to bring to our executives, and we need to have that conversation to start influencing what does it mean for us as a company, and where are we going, to make sure that we swim with that current, and eventually we get to a point that we say, we understand what skills our organization is going to need in the future, and we start recruiting in that way as well. So how do we do that as Randstad? We can move to the next slide. We see that there is a lot of data available, but how to make sense of that data? How do you combine the right sources of data? And how do you make sure that that data is up to date? And I think we can say that there's basically not one data source that's going to answer all of these questions for you. So you need to be a little bit practical. Where can I find the right data points? How can I mix and match those data points so that I'm comfortable in using that data and then it actually starts telling us? A couple of resources that we definitely look at is our talent trends research. That shows how human capital leaders are now thinking about these topics, and you can see if you recognize that in your company, and you can also share that with your executives to talk about not only we are facing these issues, but it's seen broader in the industry. And then it's about trying to find that hard data. What is supply and demand doing? What is the salary in certain locations? We see more and more companies becoming what I call location agnostic. It doesn't matter necessarily where this person is located, as long as they're part of a virtual team, they can do the work anywhere. But that means that your talent pool is becoming much bigger, but it also means that the data points on salary, what kind of employer burden do you have, etc., it changes. So you need to take that into account. So macroeconomic indicators can help you with that. Salary can be an interesting indicator there as well to leverage wage arbitrage, for example. Another topic that we see quite a lot is diversity. And I think in Europe, it is still a little bit under represented item. But I think we'll get there. We know from every research that diverse groups are performing better. And do we talk about at a board level as well on what diversity can do for us as a company? So diversity data to show what does diversity look like for us as an organization, and we know that there are challenges around this data as well, but it's an important topic to bring that to the table. And these things need to form together that package that you show to your executives, have an ongoing conversation and share with you, even when there's maybe no purpose. Share this information with your executives. Make sure that that conversation is starting, because that will form their ideas and that will form the strategy of the company. So that's how I wanted to open this opportunity to become more strategic as recruitment, but also the challenge to not think at the end of the stick and complain, why didn't we get that forecast, but become active earlier in that process to make sure that we influence the strategy of our company, to make sure that everything becomes more fluid and we become more successful as an organization. Gregor, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joost. Let me stop the sharing. Perfect. Yeah, so first of all, I think it's an interesting point of view, and I think we all agree that recruitment needs to be more and more strategic, also acknowledged in executive management. So, but let's go really back, starting at the discussion point. For me, everything starts actually with data. So it will be interesting to get now some insights from you as talent acquisition leaders. So Ute, maybe starting with you first, especially when we talk about data. You already mentioned data and talent acquisition is a key topic for you. Can you let us know which kind of data are you collecting within Deutsche Telekom? Only internal data or external as well?
Yes, for sure. I can give some insights. So first of all, we have different views on data. So one is the process views, and this is mostly internal data, especially for our talent acquisition team. That leads us more to the excellence, what the teamers are doing. So, but we also gather here a lot of data points to look always if we are right on track or if we have to change something. So this is one perspective, and the other perspective, of course, is we also looking for external or look into external data. So that we have labor market insights, skill evolvement insights, that we have location trends and something like that one, that we can give some advices also to the business, what is really needed, also from a sourcing strategic perspective, but also it starts earlier if we think about trends and skills, they will evolve in a higher scale. So this is a short sneak peek, because I think Jonathan can add more.
Yeah, it would be great, Jonathan. Let us know what can you add from UCB perspective.
So, a lot of the issues we fix and we try or a lot of the issues we face rather and try and fix through data. Understanding an accurate picture of exactly where we are and what our performance is. So that's the first layer of data is understanding the day-to-day business. Our second block, if you wish, is much more on understanding the journey we've been on that's got us to the situation we are in today. So understanding how does today's picture differ from what it was 6 months or 12 months or 2 years ago. And then if we can build this, then we get an understanding of what UCB looks like when it works well. And this is a purely, purely looking at numbers. It's not trying to interpret any of the stories of how we came to here. It's literally looking at where are we now. From this, what we try and do is we've built a set of basic fundamental ratios that allow us to project where we think we will be in 6 months or a year's time, based on what we know about today and based on what we've experienced in the past. Now, the interesting and insightful part of this is we can then feed back to the business the fact that if we continue on our current recruitment trend, for example, we can anticipate our headcount would be this much. And if we find from our leadership that actually we know that our headcount shouldn't be that high, or that we're anticipating that it would be considerably higher based on budgets and things, then we can help adjust the speed at which we recruit, the kinds of recruiters we need to have on board, those kinds of things. So trying to collect data is it's kind of a battle for every day for us. But the insights we gain from that can be really rich and valuable. The one thing that data does not tell us is the story. So, for example, if I look at the difference in today's situation compared to what it was in a year ago, the data isn't going to tell me we're living through a pandemic. It's not going to tell me that the reason why my average time to hire has dropped down by 2 days is because of the fact that we don't have to make candidates travel anymore. They're readily available. We know they're at home. There's nowhere else for them to go. So it's small things like that. So we have to be careful around data, but it can give us an insight. But it's one side of two big parts: understanding the story and understanding the position you're in right now.
No, it's an interesting point, especially from the story perspective. When we talk about, I think Ute already also highlighted the topic about how to utilize data in the right way. So putting it into a context, this kind of topics. Where do you see the biggest advantage in combination with talent acquisition on utilizing this kind of data? So when you take from operational perspective, and how do you use it in the best way for UCB?
So for us, I think our first the first insight that I benefit from is the ability to plan my resources much better. I can see that, for example, if we're going to be becoming a much more digital company, that I need to have great recruiters in that field. But if we're having, being a biopharma company, if we're having a big drive on a particular research and development project, that I need to have recruiters who can find great scientists. Or if we're about to launch a new product, I need to have great recruiters who can find great salespeople. So it allows me to plan my resources much better. But then it also allows me to feed back into the business the state of the market. So I can say, okay, if in a year's time you want to launch a drug in this particular therapeutic area, I can look at the data that we gather from our existing recruitment and also from outside sources to say, well, the market is only so big or so small, so it will only yield so many candidates to us. This is where they're located. This is how risky it is going to be for us. And historically, we know how long it's taken us to hire these profiles in the past. So therefore, we can start retro planning and retro engineering a recruitment plan to make sure that when the business needs these people, we can make sure that we've put every resource in place to find them if in the right time frame. And that's what we're aiming and trying to do all the time.
No, for me, it's really, you talked also now about, location strategy. Ute started also the topic, for example, on to make sure, okay, are we on the right track with our performance? So for me, it's also always interesting to understand, okay, where do you put your focus on, for example, from an excellence perspective? So I think I already used once the example, because I like the study from the ICR. It's really about, they really ask the people about, okay, what do you actually measure and where do you see the most relevance? Most of the people answered really, they're looking for satisfaction and quality from a KPI recruitment perspective, what is important. But what they also all answered, what they're actually measuring are typical quantitative data like number of applications, number of visits. Ute, where do you put your focus on from Deutsche Telekom perspective when you talk about business excellence?
It's definitely not number of applications, because therefore I need more people if I have two applications. Don't get me wrong, I like to have a lot of applications, but I like to have the right one. So, and there is a difference between. So it was definitely in the past always a driver that everyone says you need at minimum so much applicants on your requisitions. And I would say this is stupid. So this is not the right way to track. So for me, to be honest, I see one advantage. If we have data in place, we can argument with data. And this is the language was the business understood. So, you know, if you say we are too slow in our hiring process and we don't have data, so yeah, what they will do. Yeah, I have other drivers, I have other things to do. So for me, it starts with a simple thing to make our process with KPI driven and also make sure that the business understands what is behind, and then make also clear with human judgment behind what was the mismatch, what was the key drivers that brings us from this excellence perspective. So this is one thing what is for me also important, not only to measure or to look on the external market data and do some forecasting and nice talent analytics, also really to look deep in your system, look what you have and use it, because this is a hard language. Everyone will understand it. This is one of my focus points, to be honest, and very open. The other focus point is really to understand the talent supply on the market, because I need to know, as Jonathan said, what is in the market in for us, meaning also with the look back in our organizations, what we have in, what we need to hire, and what is the prediction there. So, and this is something, what is the second focus point for me that I would like to raise here as two perspectives, what is from my side needed.
Well, it's an interesting point. And I think, as I said, there's one key point, the data you have already internally in place, utilizing them, and then the one is the external data, where, for example, we also as SourceRight really rely on. Joost, can you give us some insights also from the Randstad or Randstad SourceRight perspective, especially already highlighted some topics on the external data topic? That would be also interesting to understand.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, there's no one data source that we can rely on. And also to chip in on what was just said, I think there's not one data point that you should just stare and blindly focus on. You always need to combine these things. And at Randstad SourceRight, we're building a tool called Randstad Market Insights, where we add all these data points together. So we add the salary trends, we add the supply and demand data together, because together that forms a picture and that can help you to tell that story and understand what's happening in the market. If you just blindly stare at one data point, you can make the wrong decisions, right? You could really go in the wrong direction. But if you put together the data and you make that central into what you do and talk about that, I think that also when you look at internal data, it's often used to kind of like control your team and all that kind of things. But you should use it to almost from a lean perspective, think about how can we improve things? How can we reduce the waste? Like Ute said earlier, it's not the number of applicants. You'd rather have a lean process with the right applicants than too many applicants in there. So how do you shape that conversation and how do you have that? That's the same for external data. It's just combining those insights, talking through with the hiring manager on what that means. If you have a low supply number, that means that this hiring manager needs to be careful with interviewing the people and make sure that he warms these people up to join the organization and that these people feel welcome in your organization. It's not just the old traditional hiring manager versus candidate. No, this candidate might be very much in demand. So make sure that we have a bit of sales to this person to bring them in. So I think that type of conversation based on the data, but with the story around that Jonathan mentioned, can be super strong and can really help your recruitment efforts.
No, interesting point of view. Ute, you talked about focusing also on quality, for example, on the number of applications instead of having the right applications. We talk about a lot of also technology at the moment is in place. What did you do with Deutsche Telekom to increase the quality, for example, in your applications? Is it more process driven, using any specific tool or technology?
It starts with analyzing what is the best source behind, and there comes the data in the game. So data told me where the applicants come from. I can analyze my sources and then took the decision, and this is the human judgment, if we bring the data topics together. And this doesn't mean they come only to the first stage application. It's really mean then to follow the whole chain until the hiring. So which one was really the best case, and the source behind. And this is why I said data is really the golden nugget, what you can use. But we have to start always with the why we are doing this, what we want to explore, what is the outcome. So if I don't have a problem with the right candidates, then it's not the task to start with this point, then it's maybe another task to start with. So this is the biggest important thing, what we have always, or has to be always in mind. Data has a security principle for me behind, and this start with trustful data, start with the minimum data set that you need, and always ask you first why I need this data. Which is the problem I would like to solve with this one? Because otherwise you can get in a jungle of data and you don't find a door outside of that.
And I agree to the point, when talking about reliability, so focusing first of all on the right data and why. So I like also the metaphor Jonathan used from a story perspective. But what about, on the one hand, you want to collect data, and then topics like reliability or also GDPR makes it a bit maybe more difficult, or maybe other regulations, to even collect the kind of data. How are you handling that within Deutsche Telekom?
We are standing for a trusted provider. So, and for us counts GDPR, but for me counts also big data ethics. And this is what I mean with, it starts with the minimum principle. So it makes no sense to sample or to collect everything because it's data. So like a swarm, you need everything, and you will never do something with that one. So therefore, I think GDPR has a right, and this gives us a frame, and we have to find out how we can answer our questions in this frame. So because we are handling with people data. So, and there is a human right behind, and there's means also we have to understand big data ethics. This is my standpoint here. So, and for me, it's also okay to go more slowly in the right direction instead of selling everyone, I'm using artificial intelligence because I'm the biggest and best one. So this is bullshit bingo. This is buzzword bingo. Let me say it like this one. If you want to start with the right things, start with the minimum approach, and follow the GDPR rules.
No, I agree. And I always wanted you to use the word buzzword, because it's really about artificial intelligence, machine learning. We all see now popping up a lot of technology, but I like the ethics point of view, especially from a data perspective. It's all still personal data we are collecting here. Jonathan, how do you make sure to be also from an ethics perspective? How do you handle data within UCB? I think that's really a crucial point.
Well, obviously we strive at all times to be GDPR compliant. That's it's a given. That, as Ute very rightly pointed out, those are the rules of the game. So if you have to play within these rules. You can use GDPR very smartly. It's not necessarily a hindrance to being able to gain insights into your business. It's not a hindrance to being able to communicate with candidates. It is just a set of regulations that allows you to do it in a way whereby the data I access is something that I, as a representative of a company, I feel responsible for managing. And so I owe this to a candidate. I owe this to anybody who applies, and I will stand by this accountability. And it's also something that candidates are very readily willing to share. When they share their CVs, they share a huge amount of very personal information, often more than you would find on their social media profiles. So we have a responsibility. We have a need as well, which is to understand who they are and where they come from. Within this balance, there is essentially a conversation. And GDPR sets a framework within which that conversation can happen. Within that conversation, we are still fully able to assess a candidate. We're still fully able to communicate with them. We're still able to give them the kind of opportunities they look for. And if we're GDPR compliant, then we do it in a completely legal and protected way. So in that sense, GDPR actually isn't a hindrance at all. It's a real help because it helps frame the conversation we can have in a responsible and legal way. And so long as you look at it that way, you're fine. Where things start to unravel a bit is that behind all this great discourse, we're still beholden to the tools we use. So if the tools don't allow you to purge candidates' data effectively, or if the processes internally mean that you're handling data in a less than efficient way, or if your system means that you can't share a CV with somebody because, well, data privacy rules say that you can't, but actually the person at the other end of the phone really needs to see that CV. It's a candidate for that team, for example. If the technology doesn't allow you to do this, then you're really, really hampered. And so GDPR isn't the problem. It's the tools we have that can't keep up with the systems we need to use. That's where we often fall foul of things. And that's so thank you, Ute. And I'm sure you have quite a lot to add to this. And feel free to complete the picture.
Yeah, I would I would add one sentence. I think we have always or often the problem that the people have some fears about data and how we use the data. And if we use GDPR in the right way, then we have a people analytics garden with a lot of great flowers. If we don't use it in the right way, then people will not allow us to use data. So, and we have, or this is our goal also as well, that we bring also a culture and that we trust in that we do in the right way. And this is our responsibility to say it very out loud.
Yeah. Really good point on this one.
Can I chip in there, Gregor?
Always.
Yeah, I completely agree with the both of you, and I also think if we look at what the future will look like, we'll see that algorithms will become more and more important. And as Randstad, I think 2 years ago we published our standards around how we're going to use how we're using algorithms, and it should never be a black box. We need to understand why an algorithm suggests a certain candidate. It should not just be based on the computer says that this is the right candidate, so therefore we hire this person. Now we need to understand what aspects of this candidate's profile makes it a good candidate, to make sure that there are no points on there that we are not in agreement from an ethical perspective. I think, and as an industry, we really need to be careful with that, because that should be the standard everywhere, that it just doesn't become a black box, that we open opportunities to a broader talent pool instead of narrowing.
Yeah, I think it's always an open discussion. So when we also talk with candidates, I often more often see also coming that candidates up in the beginning of the process already reach out to us and say, okay, can you please delete my data? I'm dropping out of the process. So it's really about giving the people, candidates, whoever, a good feeling about how we as organizations are handling their data. I think that's really a crucial point. That's why, for me, it's really also not only about, as Ute said, this kind of buzzwords, yeah, machine learning, all this stuff. Really starting with the basic things. For me, we always talk about our tech and touch approach, but for me personally, the human touch is crucial, especially within talent acquisition, and therefore, it's really also about, I think, youth, or you already mentioned it, reskilling, upskilling. It's a continuous topic about making sure that we are on top as talent acquisition, our teams, and it's not about how to handle data, how to work with candidates. So it's really always about becoming acknowledged advisors and experts to our clients, but also to the candidates we are working with. And so it's a continuous topic about upskilling our teams. For me, it would be interesting to understand, Ute, maybe first, what do you do regarding your teams to really upskill them continuously? Because there are so many topics we talk about. We're talking about always new technology, how to work with data, GDPR topic, business ethics. There's so many topics. How do you handle this kind of upskilling with your teams?
Yeah, with my recruiting team, we have designed a recruiting academy. So with different perspectives, with different items behind. We have also special people. They are responsible to be really an expert. In this case, we call it like this one. So subject matter experts. We have one for GDPR. We have one really for using labor market data. We do regular trainings here. But I was using also one simple thing together as we was implementing our new process recruiting analytics. I was doing every week a call with my recruiters. Every week, a short call to explain what was happened, why it was happened, and then to really talk the reason why. And we cannot expect from everyone that everyone starts and understand everything. So because we have different roles in data usage. So we have the data analyst on the one hand side, but we have also the data users. And everyone needs another, let me say, training set to understand their role and also what they have to do, in this case, using data. So this is what we do. And we focused really on upskilling on a regular basis, yearly, the recruiters in a called Recruiting Academy.
I like that. Really also the combination of the subject matter experts in this combination.
Yeah, they can bring new things in. They can bring also some, do you see that already, or updated versions and something like this one. And we have so many connection points. There is a need to have someone because not everyone can do everything on the same time. So, that's also a truth behind. And if you have the chance to have a bigger team, then I always can recommend to build some special team members or subject matters in your team. And then you have also a team and peer learning installed.
Good point. Jonathan, can you share some light also from a UCB perspective? What are you doing to upskill your teams?
I don't think I can claim to be quite as far advanced as Ute in her deployment of these things. But there are a couple of things we have done. What I try and foster within for recruitment teams is an aim to have what I call a better quality conversation with the stakeholders. So what do I mean by this? Very simply, there are some simple tools that simple, they're not simple actually, they can be quite elaborate, but there are some great tools out there that we've equipped our recruiters with so that they can have access to better knowledge and better data about the markets. So classically, these would be things like a CRM, candidate relationship management tool that allows you to, as you're talking to hiring managers, check out on your database who are the people you have access to, what are the kinds of profiles, what's the size of the population of people that we already know who can fill a role. And equally, if we're talking to hiring managers or talent partners, tools like LinkedIn's Talent Insights have proven very valuable for recruiters. So now all our recruiters have access to this as well, quite simply because for some really, really hard to find roles, sometimes you need to be able to, whilst you're doing an intake or a briefing call with a hiring manager, be able to push back on some of the criteria that they're looking for, saying, well, I can tell you right now, just typing into Talent Insights, but there are no people who have all those skills in that location, period. So let's not kid ourselves. Let's not waste a month trying to find the unfindable and trying to convince people who don't exist to join a company they don't know for reasons that we can't find. It's never going to work. So using data allows us to at once kind of come across as real knowledgeable subject experts with a proper, unbiased view of our markets, and provide that information live into the people who really, really need it but don't have access to it, in this case, hiring managers. So that's what I mean when I talk about having a better quality of conversation. That's how I want the insights to be used by our teams. Those are the kinds of things we do. Yeah. Thank you, Ute. That's very kind.
I appreciate it, because we are doing the same, and it's always the same game. We in, and it's not starts always with fancy things. It starts with the right things, and this is what you said already. Better conversations is one of the most important things, and I start to smile because I also remembered that sometimes our business asked us to deliver 50 times a profile what is not even on the market available. And I don't always think, might be a good idea, but maybe give some time that they are upskilled in these areas, and you described the same thing. So we have the same challenges.
We do. It's so what's very interesting in the conversations we've had in the past, Ute and I, is that whilst we work for very different businesses, operating very different markets, very different industries, with very different recruitment challenges, when they're boiled down to their essentials, we have the same problems. But we may come to these problems with very different needs and very different solutions. So, for example, I know that Ute mentioned that she doesn't necessarily care how many people apply to a role. You're right, you shouldn't. But if I look at UCB's data and I look at the pharma industry, I know that, for example, if I don't have between 50 and 75,000 applicants to all my positions coming into my pipeline of candidates every year, that I'm going to struggle, and my time to hire is going to increase significantly, because I'm simply not seeing enough people coming in that I can pick enough good ones to fill all my roles. So there are a lot of, core fundamental figures, core ratios that are specific to each and every industry, and often also specific to each and every business or geography. That means that if you don't master this, you're not going to be able to fill the roles at the end of the year. That's it. And it's not a case of just saying, oh, I'm going to pump up my pipeline to 100,000, and then I can recruit twice as many. It doesn't work like that. It's a case of always skewing the odds in your favor by really using the data to find the points where you can, okay, if I just do this tweak, I can proportionally increase my chances of success. Do that enough times, and all of a sudden recruitment becomes easier. Now, here's the difference between between data and insights. The data, you need the data to find this out, but no machine can give you those insights. We have to work this out for ourselves. It's the skills of the people, the recruiters, and people like Ute and myself and you and everybody else on this call that makes a difference. It's our ability to distinguish the noise from all that, the signal from all that noise, that's going to allow us to actually make those right tweaks, and eventually we have all our hires. That's more an art than a science, if you ask me. So data, yeah, it's like musical notes, but just because you have musical notes doesn't mean you've got a tune,
Yeah, as you said, as our former conversation, we said both. Data is our decision support. With data, we can do better decisions. But before we can do better decisions, we need to understand what is in the data. So, and there comes the human judgment in. And I think this is the human factor. No machine is in a moment allows to answer that one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and I think, Jonathan, you mentioned, Ute and you, for example, tackling different industries. But what really comes out from both of you, and I think also from my point of view, it's really we are really striving to become trusted advisors to the business, and that's one of the key topics to rely on. And I also, for example, I love also the fact that we are also really upskilling our teams internally, really focusing on really become trusted as advisors. So really, the hiring manager knows if we tell you something, we know what we are talking about. They trust our advice. They trust the way we are creating insights, and that it doesn't matter if you're talking about internal or external. This is for me always crucial. And we're doing also, I think, a lot on this one to really focus on because the world is changing fast. We're talking maybe today this kind of point of view on data or how to draw insights. It's maybe different in the next half a year because things are changing fast. So it's always about being on top, always being on top. And therefore, you need to not forget the human piece in all of this chain because it's still a people business. And it will stay like that. It doesn't matter how much data we put in. What I would like to know, Jos, can you share some insight? Because I personally, from my point of view, experience, we do also a lot of really to upskill our people regarding becoming real talent advisors or trust advisors. Can you share some light on Randstad and Randstad SourceRight? What are we doing on this one?
Yeah, I think there are four key points there. So one is data fluency. We need to make sure that all our recruiters are comfortable with the data, understand what the tools do, have a good feeling about that, are agile in using it. So that data fluency needs to be kind of like we need to raise the floor on that. And then the second part is, I think Jonathan and Ute both touched upon it. We need to have that data as a shared language. So how do we make sure that that is a conversation that you have with the team, with your hiring managers, and that it all starts to make sense and that we start the same language? So I think Ute's example of having ambassadors on the topic like GDPR is very helpful in that, because then you have somebody that brings in that shared language and discusses that with your whole team. Then the other part, which I often see in the recruitment world still sometimes as an issue, is KPIs. Are the KPIs in line with the behavior that you want to do? And when we talk about number of candidates, is that a KPI, and is that something you want to accomplish, or is it an indicator that you want to have that conversation about? That KPIs always need to be in line with what you're trying to achieve, and often it has not moved with the time. So I think that is an important point. And the last point is the thing that I think often we forget, but it's super important, is time. Let's give everybody in the team that works in recruitment the time to experiment with these tools. Have the time to join a webinar and understand the different views. Have the time to have that conversation about it. Often we try to organize it as efficient as possible, and we forget that this change that we're going through as an industry takes time for everybody to catch along and play with. So build in that time in your team that they feel comfortable in using all the data that they have available.
Good point, really. I'm a bit, cautious of time, so Ute, Jonathan, and Jos, I hope you're fine with doing 5 minutes longer from your point of view. Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of. Because I would have one last question. I would like to have a few Q&A questions as well. Can you just share some light on where are you seeing recruitment also moving into the future? So, to close it off with the beginning from Joost, when we talk about recruitment and talent acquisition getting become more and more strategic, where are you seeing this kind of topic is going into the future? Maybe Jonathan, you want to answer first. It'll be interesting to see.
Maybe I do. Maybe I don't as well, because I'm not entirely sure. No.
Can I step in and ask this question back?
Yeah.
For me, is recruitment already strategic focus? If we have we both working in areas where people matters. So if then we don't talk about recruitment as a strategic topic, then I have a real problem.
Then I rephrase it, but how to make the business more aware of it? then it's actual strategy, because I completely agree on this one.
No, I totally agree with you too. The notion that recruitment comes in almost as an afterthought to the business has been a lifelong battle, I think, for most of us on the call today. Our ability to get in on these conversations earlier in the process is determining not in the choices of the kind of people we're going to look for, not in determining in the volumes or anything like that, but it allows us, like I said, I think when at the beginning of the call, it allows me to plan my resources more effectively. It means that when the challenge comes live, I'm ready for it. That's the difference. So in that sense, recruitment is strategic. Talk to any business leader in any position anywhere in the world, and they'll probably tell you their number one problem is people. And finding people is always going to be in the top 3 priorities of every single business leader out there. And yet, strangely, in too many cases, the business goes so far down the line and of saying, oh, we need somebody for this, we need somebody for that, and they never think to ask recruitment to sit at the table and say, how are we going to do this? And so that's a battle we have to fight all the time. And Ute, I know you're very passionate about this, so let me hand over to you, maybe.
Thank you for that. But I think you explained it very well. For me, we have sometimes the feeling we are not strategic enough. But if we really look in and bring ourselves on the table, and we often misunderstand also or don't understand this, we always look on the external recruiting. But if I look on the internal mobility, and also with the automation was now is coming in, and the reskilling part, and the internal placement part, the succession management part, the talent brokerage part, there is recruitment in, we forgot that always. And this is something, if we don't focus, might be right now not on the external market because COVID hits us, then might be we focus on the internal market. So, and I think it's on us to strengthen up together. If there are, we are not sitting in one department together, then to strengthen up and make it more visible, because people matters in most of our companies.
Good point. So it's 3 p.m. So the area for Q&A session will be limited, as you expect. But Jonathan, Ute, and Joost agreed on give us at least 5 minutes more. So please feel free to use the Q&A chat box. So I had one, Jonathan, already coming directly maybe to you. It's when we talked about the basics, and using the data we have already available. How do you make sure, for example, that the talents you have maybe already in your CRM or in your ATS, that you are still finding them? So it's really a talent pipelining topic. How do you make sure that you have the right visibility?
That's a tough one. I don't know. We do our best, I guess, is the most honest answer I can give you. We can never be sure that we can find or make visible the right people. Ute a second ago was talking about internal mobility and things like that. One of my biggest frustrations is the fact that actually, if I want to find out lots of information about my colleagues, LinkedIn has better data on them than I do. And so I guess that's the issue. Trying to make people visible. They are far more visible to external recruiters than they are to me sometimes. So I don't know. I don't know the answer because honestly, I haven't figured it out yet.
It's a fairly good answer, Jonathan. I think that's completely fine.
Thank you.
There's also one really about more like, from a strategic point of view, asking about the future trends. It's about, do you see any changes from a trend perspective due to COVID-19 happening from a talent acquisition perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think overall, what we see is that a lot of the trends that were already there are expedited. So a lot of things that we knew were kind of coming, remote working being the obvious one, it's just expedited. And we see that more and more. And I find it interesting, the struggles that we find with that as well, is that sometimes are you able to put in your ATS that there is no location for this recruitment? That kind of struggles you still see. But that is a definite trend on remote workers, and it brings in all other challenges that I find also fascinating. Is like, how do we start payrolling this when they're located in Bali or things like that? So what will that look like in the future? I think is fascinating, but already opening up that talent pool to broad locations, that's definitely one that we see. I think the other thing to be quite aware of is what is being named the K-shaped recovery, which I find from a personal perspective and even a company perspective sometimes a bit troubling. We see that there are people that are definitely benefiting from the current situation. If we look at all the digital profiles, they're super in demand and they're fine. But we also see large amount of people in our workforce that are not benefiting from that, that are in a difficult position, and then maybe face another wave of automation there. And these people are not benefiting. And we as a society need to think about, how do we keep these people on board? How do we keep them in jobs? How do we reskill them that they're ready for the future? So if I stick to two trends, I would say the remote working and the K-shaped recovery as the lasting trends that we need to be aware of.
A good point. Yeah, cautious out of time. I would love to discuss with all of you 1 or 2 hours, even longer. But first of all, yes, thank you very much, Ute, Jonathan, and Joost, really for taking the time and giving really some valuable insights. Has been a really nice discussion. For all of you, we will send out the recording afterwards. If there are any follow-up questions, also from you Q&A perspective, don't